Senator Reid, I'd like to start by asking you about the jobs bill and the status of that in Washington, the one put out, of course, by President Obama, and especially thinking about how Rhode Islanders are affected. As you know, we are not recovering as quickly as the rest of the country, or haven't. Our unemployment remains pretty high. What is the status of the bill, and why should Rhode Islanders care about it?
Well, our unemployment is unacceptably high. The key factor that Rhode Island families are looking at now is what can we do in not just Washington but every place to create jobs. The President's job bill makes a lot of sense for Rhode Island. It would invest in infrastructure, with long-term investment. We've got a number of projects that are necessary. It would also continue some of the benefits that we saw previously in terms of tax support for hiring people who've been laid off for more than 6 months to small businesses. It would increase the ability of payroll tax reductions, which will help put money in the pockets of individual Rhode Islanders. The plan, I think, is sound. It is fully paid for. It would be paid for by a surcharge on people making over $1 million a year. That provision is widely supported by people throughout the United States. We've run into another roadblock by my colleagues on the Republican side who do not want to consider the bill, so we've procedurally been stopped.
So the status right now is that the Senate took a procedural vote and the bill is dead?
Well, the bill
Can it still?
The bill has been stopped, but we're not going to give up. We can't give up. This is the issue of the moment. We'll try again. There has been some discussion of breaking up parts of the bill, moving an infrastructure-only bill that would go to roads and bridges and school construction. The President's proposal is for thousands of schools across the country to improve their infrastructures, which is, again, makes sense not just in terms of putting people to work, but preparing the next generation for a very competitive world in which you need good facilities, good educational facilities.
So if you had to choose, if you had to say, okay, there's one piece of the President's bill that we really must have, would that be it, the infrastructure piece?
I think the infrastructure is the one that has the most effect. I think everything has been sort of carefully thought through, and indeed, by and large, all these provisions individually in the past have had significant bipartisan support. That's another difficult thing to understand. If these provisions are all individually have strong bipartisan support, collectively they should, and if the commitment by the Congress is to be responsible and pay for these things and it's fully paid for, why aren't we moving? And we've run into opposition by the Republicans.
And clearly you probably know why we're not moving, right? I mean, there's a lot of politics going on.
There are politics going on, but I think we've reached the point where the American public, to both sides, is saying, listen, you've got a job to do, do the job. Go ahead. They understand that this is going to be a very difficult and arduous climb out of a huge chasm. You know, the collapse of the economy in 2008. We're beginning to realize we're much deeper than we thought in 2009 when President Obama took office. But we've got to sit down, we've got to get together, we've got to find common ground, and indeed we thought this was common ground.
The Republicans now have sprinkled some of their own jobs initiatives in. Are there any that you think are doable, that make sense?
Well, a lot of the rhetoric now is just simply eliminating regulations and that'll bring back the jobs. But frankly, that was the George Bush program. Just let me deregulate everything, particularly in financial services, and the jobs will spring back. I don't think the record shows that. I think what we've seen is these targeted provisions that provide incentives to hire people directly to small business, infrastructure investments which will not only help us in the short run, but long term will increase our productivity. You know, when we can move goods and services around the country faster, that helps us not just today, but in the future. If we do those things, I think we'll move forward. So, yeah, I've heard, you know, proposals, but nothing I think that is sensible enough and thoughtful enough as the President's proposal.
Before we finish talking, well, two things. When do you think, if the President's proposal or a piece of it can move, what is the time frame for that?
Well, we're really at sort of the mercy procedurally of the Senator McConnell and his colleagues in the Republican caucus. We could move it very quickly if there was an agreement, and I think my colleague Senator Harry Reid is trying to reach that agreement. We've made, I must say, there has been some bipartisan cooperation and collaboration. Just this week, we passed the China currency bill, which we think, if it passes the House, will go a long way of restoring the sort of the rules of the game in terms of international trade. We were able to extend and pass a patent bill. So there's been some small improvements, but this job bill is so central to what people need, what they want, and what they expect us to do.